How's that bag doing?
Oh man, I can't keep eating that. I'm not going to be able to taste the food tonight.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Live Your Mission show, brought to you by Mission Meets, where our guests share their most actionable advice so that you can live a more mission-centered life. I'm your host, Peter Alwood, co-founder of Mission Meets, and today we are joined by David Hauser, former co-founder of Grasshopper, and then now the author of the book Unstoppable, which we talk about at length. And you guys are going to love this one. But before we get into that, just a little bit about what's happening at Mission Meets headquarters. As of this recording, we just officially launched our tasty original beef jerky to go alongside the Reaper jerky that David tries to eat on this episode. For those of you that don't like flavors that will melt your face off, like this one, okay, Carolina Reaper. So we launched that today. We've got some other flavors coming out, and then we have so many insanely fun and exciting and very difficult projects for Mission Meets that for products that we're rolling out that you guys are just super excited to launch and introduce to you all Mission Meets customers and eventual customers of ours. So just a little bit about what's happening there. And another thing, we are going to have a segment on this show to highlight folks that are living their mission. And so if you want to be a part of that, post on social, hashtag live your mission, or shoot us an email. If you want to be more discreet, that's fine too. I don't know why you'd want to be discreet though, because I'm going to be sharing it on the show. But anyways, of people that are living their mission, whether it's you or someone that you really admire, we got an email from someone doing care kits, and this looks like they were kind of these packages of necessities plus snacks and supplies that some kids put together that we did a small part and donated some product to. And so they just successfully delivered 250 care kits to, they say, New York City's legendary soup kitchen, the Meatloaf Kitchen. And those were distributed to their homeless attendees. So it's very cool. Awesome to see pictures of kids down on the ground with boxes of stuff that they're kitting and putting together, and then putting those in the back of their hatchback vehicle, looks like, and delivering those to the soup kitchen. So just very cool. I love seeing stuff like that. So if you want to be highlighted on the show, we'd love to give you a shout. Just tag us or email us, like I said, and we will pick someone to feature here. So anyways, onto the show with David Hauser. David, he formerly founded a company that was, I don't know if you want to call it voice over IP, but it's like a telephone service for small and medium-sized businesses. That when he sold it was doing about 35 million or so, I think he said, of revenue a year. So super successful dude. But we talk about it only because he was working an insane amount of hours and not taking care of himself, and decided that post that business, that he was going to take the same tactics that they utilized in business and apply to his health. And something that he had struggled with all of his life, said he always felt fat and hungry. And so it was one of these things where everything that he did, all the conventional wisdom, as he says, he followed, and it just didn't work. And this guy, I mean, someone who ran marathons, Ironmans, like crazy stuff, and was still not able to feel good and feel healthy and feel satisfied with himself as far as his health and wellness. And so he's like, why not take what they applied and what made Grasshopper successful and apply it to his personal life, to his physical health, which is an interesting idea. And not to say that there's like this one size fits all diet, but instead say, here's some methodology I'm going to follow in order to find what works for me personally, which I love, because some people will be very prescriptive, as I say on the show, and try to say, here's what you need to do. Oh, I know what you need to do. You need to follow this diet, or you need to eat this thing, or stop eating this thing, or do this exercise. But that's very frustrating to me, because everybody's different. We're all different. We all have different genetic makeups. We have different backgrounds as far as our diet and our health and what's going on in our internals, what responds well to our bodies, what doesn't, what makes us feel satisfied and satiated, and what doesn't. And so I just love the way he painted it as far as like being, optimizing yourself and measuring and figuring out what works for yourself. And so he talks about that book. It's called Unstoppable. He has a deal for viewers, listeners at the end of the show for his product that we actually don't even talk about during the whole show. But at the end, I bring it up because I know it's a very tasty, delicious product that we've actually collaborated with here at Mission Meats. And so listen for that. He tries to eat the Carolina Reaper. So we'll watch when he opens that bag up and takes a whiff. So we've got that on the Reaper round. And that's it. I don't want to spoil it. Thanks for tuning in. And now on to the show. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
Hey, man. I'm excited to have you, dude. And we're going to jump right into the book that you just released, right? Your most recent book and all that stuff. But before we jump into that, I do want you to share a little bit of your backstory. Tell us why you're writing a book called Unstoppable. Kind of what is the 60 to 120 second version of like what led up to the writing of this book? Why is David even
Sure.
caring about
Yeah.
it?
So what's really interesting is I never expected to write a book like this. My background is software as a service, and I built and ran a company, Grasshopper, from 0 to 30 million a year in revenue. A team of about 40 people, very profitable, and then we sold the business a few years ago. So I never expected to write any book, let alone one about health and wellness. But through that journey, I went from working 100+ hour weeks to finding my own health journey and figuring out that, maybe I didn't need to work that much. And also kind of those same arcs in a lot of other categories, from diet and exercise and being overweight to finding the diet that worked right for me. And my core purpose is empowering others to succeed, and that was our core purpose at Grasshopper. So now I've really translated that, because people kept asking me and saying, David, how did you lose weight? How did you do this? And I kept coming back to the idea that it didn't really matter how I did it, other than the framework I used. Like, I specifically chose a diet that worked for me, right? But it could work for anyone, but each person has to find their own diet. And the framework that I built really allows for that. And it's quite a simple framework. I just stole it from, a continuous improvement or A/B testing framework, and it just works.
So you took I wouldn't call it a programmer's perspective, right? But an entrepreneur's perspective on optimizing a business, and you applied it to your life. And you've got a phrase for that?
Yeah, it's an optimization mindset, right? So at Grasshopper, we really built this internally, and it took a few years to get there, but it transformed the business from a productivity standpoint and a profitability standpoint, where we started testing each of our hypotheses and saying, maybe we don't know exactly what's right here. Let's make small tests again and again and again until we get the right, button color on the website, the right pricing plan, all of these different things. Now, when we did this well in the business, I started to question why I didn't do this in my own life, right? Like, I just assumed that what I read and was told by kind of popular culture, eat a low-fat diet, high in carbs, was the right thing to do. And it's clearly not the right thing to do. But I just assumed that, rather than testing and thinking about how do I optimize myself.
Yeah. And give us an example, I guess, in business where you didn't follow this optimization mindset. So that, someone who's listening, watching, can at least get in the right frame of mind. Like, okay, this is what David's talking about. It's not this thought process, it's this other one. Do you have an example?
Yeah. So I think this is a really interesting example that I've used once or twice before, which is, so we were always testing on the website to see what conversion worked the best, right? Like, how did we convert the most users for the highest dollars, right? And so we had all sorts of tests running. And one of them was, if we put the pictures of me and my business partner on the front of the website, this was not our idea because we didn't really like it, but if we put our pictures there, what would happen with conversion, right? And conversion went up. So this is a very challenging scenario, right? Because I don't like this. I don't want my picture on the front of the website. Like, that's not the image that we wanted. There were a lot of reasons that I didn't like it. However, the data showed that it performed better. So we had to make a decision at that point and say, do we care about the image and the brand, or we do care about conversion, right? And you don't have to always go with conversion. We decided to go with the brand and say that wasn't who we wanted to be, right? But if we hadn't even thought through that, we wouldn't even have the data to make a decision, right? And I think when you start to go down that path, the team as a whole starts to be able to challenge us as founders, but also individually on the team, say, hey, I don't know if that's really true. Let's find out and test, rather than just guessing at things.
Yeah. It's this idea of trust but verify, right? So like you have an intuition, you have an idea of what's going to work, and whether that's diet or business or whatever, but you do need to verify, right? You've got to measure and make sure that it is the right outcome. And
And
so
most importantly, what you discover is things that you didn't know, right? Like, sometimes your hypothesis is the opposite of what happens, right? And that's a
yeah.
very interesting discovery.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you can still make an informed decision, say, okay, yep, conversion rate did go up, but I still don't want my picture on the front of the website.
Right.
Right. And then you're making an informed decision. And so you took that and you translated it to health. But
Yeah.
why you, like, why health? I know there's a quote from your book that I wanted to just, to reiterate or to quote here. And you said, there are two dark clouds that have always hovered over me. One, I've always felt fat, and two, I've always felt hungry.
Yeah.
Now, so, I mean, I wanted to point that out because you're not like just a healthy guy who wanted to get a little bit healthier, right? Like
Yeah.
this was something quite different than that.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
I can remember all the way back to high school feeling overweight, and I played football and I lifted weights. So that was kind of my way of hiding that. Right. And then the clothes that I wore and decisions that I made. Right. But I always felt that way. I then went to college and I gained weight because there was food always available. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point after that, I decided, like, I wanted to lose weight, and I had tried all sorts of things. Right. Because identifying with being overweight and making the decision to try to lose weight, I had tried all sorts of diets with varying success, but none of them lasting, right? Which just builds on this frustration that started to build over the years, right? And then always feeling hungry was another difficult one, because the popular media and the mainstream says, you should snack. And I'm like, perfect, I'm always hungry, I'm going to snack. That didn't work for me because I overly snacked. I just ate all the time, right? And even when I tried to kind of use quote unquote self-control, it just built more frustration, because I'm like, I'm just really hungry now, because my body was on a bad cycle of eating the wrong things, which I now know, right? So I think that all came to a boiling point after trying all sorts of things, including doing Ironman, triathlons, and marathons. So 30 plus hours a week of exercise, or getting to a race and putting on the spandex, shorts, and thinking, why do I have fat hanging over this? Like, I'm literally killing myself riding 7 or 8 hour bike rides,
Mm-hmm.
and something's not working. Right. And that was kind of the point. I said, there's a big problem here.
Yeah. So you were doing a lot of the right things, right? It wasn't like you were sitting on the couch and not trying to do stuff. Like you were
I was
doing
trying.
things and they weren't working for you, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I always think about is it's very simple to say, oh, dude, you need keto. Oh, you know what you need? You need to be vegan. You need to be raw vegan, right? You need to go all veggies. And I feel like society is very prescriptive in that way, where it's just like, oh, one size fits all. This is what you need to do. You do that, you're good. You're going to run an Ironman, dude. You're going to be in amazing shape, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Um,
I saw that again and again and again. Right. I did everything I was told to an extreme, and it didn't work for me. Right.
mhm.
And that was the frustration. Like, it didn't work for me. And we can talk about, like, what diet did work for me. And I think there are some simple rules that anyone can follow, but I would never say that keto is for everyone or vegan is for everyone. Like, that's a ridiculous statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it requires some testing and some discovery. And then when we start to peel that onion back a little bit, we find that each of us have food allergies and other sensitivities to different foods. So I might be able to eat a ton of one thing, and you eat a little bit of it and it starts to bother you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the things that take individual testing.
Yeah. Like I think of a friend of mine he realized he has a histamine reaction to spinach. And like, you would never think like, oh, dude, you should need to eat more veggies. For this guy, it actually literally makes him super sick, right? And so just understanding that everybody's individual, we all have a different genetic makeup. Maybe somebody's got leaky gut, somebody doesn't. And so it's all going to play a factor. And so that's why I love that you're creating this framework to share. So it's like, no, this is not a one size fits all. You got to follow, you got to measure, you got to test, and then you can see kind of what's working for you and what's not. And so the book's called Unstoppable. Why is it called that?
Yes, we actually tested the title,
I
so
believe that.
it wasn't the title that I wanted originally, but I actually love the title now as we started to kind of work with it and use it. But the original title was Evolve,
Okay.
and that was the title I loved. But when we tested it, like it performed far better. Unstoppable. And I think the reason is it very much relates to just being amazing, right? Like each individual, like we just want to be amazing for ourselves, right? It's not a competition. It's not a comparison to others. We just want to be amazing and unstoppable for ourselves in our own life, right? And each of us have a different definition of what that means. And I think the title allowed people to create that definition, right? When I say unstoppable for me, that might mean high productivity, low brain fog, engaged at home, and eating a diet I like. That's very different for you, right?
Hmm. Yeah, but lots of overlaps for people too. I mean, lots of folks that are walking around feeling like they could have more energy and they could perform better, right?
Yeah.
They want to be unstoppable. I think we all would like to be some iteration of that, right?
Yeah.
And so for you and going through the process, and I'd love to hear kind of about what worked and what didn't. What were some of the surprises? What were some of the things that you found that were hindering you
Yeah.
that you just that weren't expected?
Yeah, I think the two biggest things are one, a lot of the things that I thought were going to be very complex and difficult actually were easier, right?
Okay.
So now not easy to do, but very simple in theory, right? So like we'll take sleep for example. I did all sorts of crazy testing, right? I had the things on the face, I did the in lab, the at home testing, I did everything, right? Expensive tools, testing, all that, right? Really what it comes down to is going to bed around 9:30 at night, waking up naturally without an alarm clock roughly when the sun rises, you know and not eating within 3 hours of bed, right? Now we can start to dig into like some of the little details, like maybe magnesium supplementation at night makes marginal increases. Maybe a cooling pad or mattress makes marginal increases, and I'm actually really liking the one that I'm using right now. But again, the biggest changes were the most simple, very difficult to do, right? Like if you see yourself as a nighttime person and you're going to bed at midnight, me saying go to bed at 9:30 is pretty extreme, right?
Hmm.
But I think throughout I discovered that it's just the simplest stuff. Um,
Hmm.
and then I think the other hindrance for me is like I love data, so I was overly data driven. Like I do blood tests every quarter, a massive amount of tests. It doesn't make sense. Like I would never recommend anyone to do that, right? So I think that held me back in certain places because I just like the data. So I tried to gather too much of it. And if it was sleep or blood testing or even how I felt at different times during the day, most of it wasn't useful, but I was focused on the data.
Got it. Got it. So, there's a segment of the book where you're talking about, kind of outlining what it is that is hindering you, right? Whether it's like issues in the bathroom, as you mentioned in the book, right? Or sleep or whatever. And I'm reading through this and I'm thinking to myself, there are plenty of folks that I know, including some things, blind spots in myself, where I don't know they're a problem. And so I think about a friend of mine who he had gone keto specifically, right? And prior to that, he felt fine. He's like, I feel fine. I'm probably not as healthy as I could be, but I feel okay. Went off carbs and all this stuff. And it's when he went back to his old diet that he realized what he actually used to feel like all the time.
Yeah.
So, how do you do that, David? I mean, like, how do you kind of find what those blind spots are? Like, maybe I think I sleep okay. And you realize, dude, if somebody else looked at it from the outside, they say, dude, you sleep like shit. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do about that?
I think there's two things. One is start to think about like how you did that 15 years ago, right? Like when we were young, we had a lot less of these things weighing us down, right? Bad habits, bad choices over the years, bad food, like all of these things, right? So think about back to that, right? Like, and then you'll see the market difference, right? Because the difficulty with either getting better or worse is it's relatively the same as yesterday, right? Like if I got a tiny bit better today, it's almost the same as yesterday. If I got a tiny bit worse, it's almost the same as yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it blends into just feeling like it's the same, right? But you have to kind of step back and say, what did this look like a long time ago? When I was 20, did I wake up with tons of energy? And it's not just because I was 20, maybe other things were happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the other thing is exactly what your friend did, which is making major changes to discover if there's differences, right? So let's take the gut, for example, right? Like a lot of people go through life now thinking that being very gassy and having an upset stomach is normal and natural. It is not, right? But we've accepted that that's what happens when we eat crappy food.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue to do it, and we're like, well, is this what happens? And if you make a massive change, not a small change, a massive change, you're like, wait a second. The last week I had no gas and I went to the bathroom normally once a day. You're like, now I see that there is something different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think if you use those two tools, that's one. The other kind of caveat to that, or the addition, would be stop taking like painkillers, even if it's Advil or Tylenol, right? Because we start to dull the feelings that we have, and that goes across the board, rather than listening to our body and saying, wait a second, why do I have a headache 5 out of 7 days a week? Maybe it's because I stare at a screen all day and I need to think about, blue light blocking glasses or using flux on my computer or something like that, right? Those types of things, rather than just saying, well, every night I just take an Advil.
Mm-hmm. So would your advice be to start keeping some sort of like food journal / pain or discomfort diary, so then you can start to outline those things?
Yeah, so I always tell people, like, think about the things that your body's screaming about, right? Like, so if there's a medical emergency or something that's tremendously in pain, I can't stand up because my back hurts so much, like those are very apparent, right? When
Mm-hmm.
we take the next step down, now we start talking about brainstorming. Like, how do we think of the things we might want to test? I think there's major categories: sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, and meditation all together, and then supplementation, right? Like, those to me are the major categories. And with each of those, I think the right way to brainstorm is to think through what other people are finding success with, do a little bit of research, and then maybe try some of those, right? I'm not saying that they're right, but it is a discovery process to decide what to work on. Once you're working on something, I think the critical thing is keeping some sort of journal, not data heavy, and it's very subjective at that point. Like sleep, I don't worry about as much about like number of hours. Like, I want a yes, no answer. Did I wake up feeling like today's a great day? Hell yes, I'm ready to go. Right. Like, that's what I want. So I want to correlate more days like that with what I did the night before and how I ate and what I did with screen time and all of those things, rather than saying like, yeah, I got 7 hours of sleep, but that doesn't tell me very much. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you could have got 7 to 8 hours of sleep, but you ate right before bed and it was greasy food and you woke up and you feel like super swollen and just like
Yeah.
blah,
Right. I didn't
right?
get good restful sleep. I probably didn't get a lot of deep sleep. All those things. So it all contributes, right?
So, so knowing what you've learned, knowing what you know now, learning through kind of your discovery process, writing the book and all that, which I'm sure kind of got all your thoughts organized, and then looking back at the grasshopper days, how would you have lived differently through that experience?
Yeah. So what's interesting is during the days of Grasshopper, I understood very acutely how important employee and team member health was, right? So we invested in training and yoga sessions and massages and healthy food at lunch and all these things, right? But I ignored it for myself.
Mm,
So I really wish that I had paid more attention to my own advice, right? And telling people to take a vacation and take a break. Like, I didn't do any of those things.
mm,
So looking back, I really wish that I had paid attention to that. And I wish that I had really questioned a little bit more conventional wisdom, right? Because when I said, helping people be healthy, I still follow conventional wisdom, right? Like, I said, well, it must be a low fat diet. I did that to an extreme, right? Like, those types of things. I wish I had at least questioned that and said, maybe that doesn't work for everyone.
mhm.
And been able to, as a voice to the company and to others, with a platform, and said, hey, you should all question this and find what works for you.
Got it. So for the viewer, the listener, looking for a couple of practical tips and ways to like actually get started, right? And clearly it's not the blood work, right? And it's not buying like a new like $4,000 mattress.
Yeah.
If you're talking to somebody that they're just starting this journey out, where should they start? Like, what are a couple of things?
Yeah. First, I would start with sleep. It affects everything. It affects how we start the day. And I do believe very fully that if you wake up early, your day is far better, period. as humans, we were made to wake up roughly when the sun rises, and we've destroyed that, like,
Mhm.
for so many reasons. So going to bed at 9:30, getting up relatively early and starting the day, I would start there. I would then for sure cut out all sugars, right? Like, we can have an argument about which diet works best and why.
Mhm.
However, across the board, there is zero dispute that removing sugar is a good choice and a good option, right? Like, that works for everyone and gets us started on that path, right? And then our palates change, our bodies start to reset, lots of things happen, and then we can go to extremes and cut out more carbs or go vegan or do whatever, right?
Mhm.
But I would start there. I would go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but David, I'm a night owl, right? I'm not a night owl, but right,
Yeah.
what do you
Hey,
do, man? Like, how
I
do you
get this
change
pushback.
it?
I get this pushback all the time,
Yeah.
right? Entrepreneurs are like, "Oh, I work at night when it's quiet." I'm like, "Look, I get it. I used to work until 3 or 4 in the morning at least, because it was time that I was, like, by myself." So first of all, I question how productive the time is at night. So when I actually started to ask myself that question, I found I was not that productive at night. I did a lot of things. I didn't do them well, and I didn't do the right things. Um, then also, I think if people really critically examine their evening time, it's not made up of that much work. There's a lot of Netflix watching and social media and wasted time. So I venture to say that it's pretty easy to cut 2 hours of that out and go to bed earlier, right?
Mhm.
So if you go to bed at 12, I can at least get you to go to bed at 10, right?
Yeah.
And getting rid of that unproductive time, it has magical things that happen the next day. Like, we are just far, far better.
Yeah. I agree. How much time should somebody give it? Like, if
Mm.
they've never got up early, like they've never been an early riser, like 6 weeks, like what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of data around how long it takes to form a habit, um, but I think you start to feel the effects after a week or two, right? Like,
Yeah.
you should start to feel those initial effects, and I wouldn't give up at that point, right? It's not instantaneous and it's not just overnight, but you start to feel the effects if you're paying attention and listening. Um, and it becomes a habit pretty quickly, because if you wake up at 5 or 6 a.m., it's hard to stay awake until 12 unless you're doing something that keeps you awake, like sitting on the computer or the phone, right? So if we reduce that a little bit, we just kind of naturally fall asleep, because there's only so many hours our body really wants to be awake.
Hmm. Yeah. It's funny because I think about, so I just recently did a water only fast for three
Mm.
days, and for digestive purposes and all that. A friend of mine was encouraging me to do it, and it was really fascinating. One of the most difficult things I've ever done. Like day 2, I felt like I was going to lose my mind. Right. Day 3, I felt a little bit better, and then the morning that I was getting ready to eat, I almost didn't eat. I felt like, oh, I think I'm okay now. Like, I got over the hump, which is really, to me, was
Day two
fascinating.
is the hardest,
Day
like,
2
for
was,
sure.
dude, I took my kids to, like, go get gyros at my favorite gyro stand. I don't know why I did. It's like I want to torture myself, and I was dying. I was just like, I don't think I can do it. I took a nap. I don't ever nap. But anyways, what was interesting is that there were a lot of things in my diet that were suspect, and we eat pretty well, very well here. But there's a coffee shop I go to, and I'm like, man, I swear I don't feel too good when I go drink coffee at this place. When I drink coffee at home, I'm okay because I do kind of a low acidity way, and sometimes I do bulletproof or whatever, right? Whatever you want to call it. Sure enough, like 3 days after this fast was over, I go have a meeting, grab a coffee, and immediately that pain comes back, and
Yeah.
I remember what it felt like. And so I think, like, isolating and really having some sort of an investigative mind, like you're talking about, it goes a really long way. But for the person that's listening or watching that just doesn't naturally inquire. And I know we know plenty of people like this. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just like you're naturally inquisitive. Like, you kind of don't even want to know. Uh, how do you start thinking that way? How do you start doing the research or actually measuring and paying attention? Is there a way to flip that switch in your mind?
Yeah, I think the easiest place for people to start is diet, right? Because it's an accepted place, right? Like, when you tell someone, I'm trying a new diet, they're like, yeah, of course, which one is it? And they have questions, right? You tell someone I'm testing with sleep, they're like, what? Right? So I
Yeah.
think just from a social perspective, it's a little more accepted. So I encourage people to start there and try to make a big change, right? Don't be like, I'm going to eat one less Dorito. Like
Mhm.
that's not going to tell you anything, right? But make something a big change, and because it's socially accepted, it's not that bad, right?
Mhm.
And I think you then start that mindset of like, okay, I found a discovery after a change. Even if you don't understand what that means, you don't have to understand what continuous integration is and continuous improvement. You just see, I made a change, I felt like this, and you start a little bit of momentum. I think once you have that momentum, you can then play with other things.
Yeah, it's addictive, right? And it's more socially acceptable than, like, when I was telling people I was doing a water only fast. They, dude, they're looking at me like, "What's wrong with you? You dying, or what's are you crazy?" I was like,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
feel crazy. Yeah, so maybe don't maybe don't start there. So,
Yeah.
all right, man. Well, dude, we are going to step into the next segment of the show. We call the Reaper round. Are you
Oh
ready?
boy, I'm ready.
All right, man. You can rip that bag open. I've got some rapid fire questions. Like I said, there it is, man. Um, I'm gonna ask them quickly, but they don't have to be short answers by any means, right? Um, so question number one, favorite book. And it could be something you read in the last year or something that you feel like is a classic for you. Could be life, business, however you want. But what's your
Favorite book. All right, this is a difficult one. So I'd say *Sapiens* is one of my favorite books,
mm-hmm.
by Yuval Harari. He's written a number of books. I think *Sapiens* is by far his best. It was his first book. Um, I think for me, it just really opened up my mind and said, like, think about our evolution a little bit differently than I might have in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it helped me in a number of areas. Now, I think a close second to that is *The Evolution of Everything* by Matt Ridley, or *Enlightenment Now* by Steve Pinkerton, or Pinker. And both of those are very much about the positivity of our current space and our current world, because although we hear about all the negatives, what's really happening is, like, we're in one of the best times ever in terms of human evolution and the evolution of everything around us, from computers and money and time and all the things around us. But we just hear about the negatives. So those books were both really nice reminders of, like, we live in an amazing time. Like, if you look back 50,000 years ago, like, the likelihood of dying at birth was pretty high. Like, that sucks. Like,
Yeah.
in general, right? Or the likelihood of dying in a tribal fight was relatively high. Like, those things have gone away. But what do we hear about terrorism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not discounting that. Like, it's bad. I get it, right? But in the grand scheme of things, as we've evolved, we are in the best place possible today.
Totally, totally, and we take it for granted, right?
Oh my God, it even smells too spicy.
Do you like spicy things?
No. I mean, like, I like not mild spice, but, like, reasonable spice.
Yeah. No, this is not reasonable.
Why did you make this?
Well, there are a couple things. One, it was kind of made for this show. Two, and I'll let you eat as much as you want while I talk. Two, we do have requests for, like, really spicy things. There are niches of
Woo!
the market that like heat. How's it taste?
It's good. It is spicy.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's not an uncomfortable spice. Like, it's actual heat,
Yeah. Yeah.
which
And
I think is different.
and it has good flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that I think is a little bit dangerous with that is that
But you have a lot of juice and sugar in here.
well, this is, like, not in our normal product line, right? Like, this is not like our normal.
I like the pepper one in your product line.
The pepper pork.
Yeah.
It's good. It's very good. Yeah. And that one's autoimmune paleo too.
Yeah.
All right.
Next question.
I'll let you keep eating. All right. So, early or late riser, I was going to ask you. We already know you're an early riser. What's that look like for you? Like, what's the time, and what's, like, your first couple of minutes?
Yeah. So relatively early. It does fluctuate though. Sometimes that could be 5 a.m. Sometimes that could be 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I never set an alarm unless I have to be at the airport for something, like, or like an early meeting. In general, I don't try to take early meetings. I try to delay that later in the day.
Mm-hmm.
My routine is very specific when I'm home. I wake up, I get the kids ready, I check my email, I get the day started, understanding what I need to do, what's important, what's not important. I take my middle daughter to school. I drop her off on the way to the gym. I then do yoga for an hour. lift weights 2 to 3 days a week before that. And that's kind of my starting routine every day. Now, even if I skip yoga because like I have something I must do, I try to schedule things like you probably saw when we scheduled the podcast, like in general after 11 a.m. Is when I start kind of filling in my day with external things, right? Um, but if I don't go to yoga, I still try to go to the gym and get ready to keep my routine, right? Like, because I know that I get ready the same way, the same day. I wear roughly the same things. You have a black shirt on too, right? Because it reduces choice and it keeps me in the routine, so I can worry about more important things.
Yeah. Yeah. I have about 7 or 8 of this exact same shirt.
Love it.
And it's just like, this is what I wear. And
Yeah.
I don't have to think about it. And it goes fine with everything. Doesn't matter the shorts or pants I've got on. And I don't think about it. Yoga, you're doing it at home or you're doing it at a studio?
I'm doing a studio. I like a pretty active vinyasa flow. So I go to Lifetime Fitness, and their program is based on Johnny Kess style, which is he developed it in Detroit actually, and it's kind of a combination of Ashtanga and Vinyasa flow. So there's combinations of both, but loud music, highly active, lots of push-ups, lots of core work in a heated room. So I love it, and I try to go 6 days a week.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Any quotes you live by?
So this is a difficult one. Like, there's a lot of quotes that I like, but I really try to live my life by my family core values. And last year we started to develop those, and we're still halfway through that process. So one of those is experiences over things. Another one is life begins at the edge, right? So like those are the things that I live by. So they're not necessarily quotes as much as what we've distilled down as our family core values and how we want to live our lives. And how we want our kids to live their lives.
You put this together with your kids?
Yeah, so our kids are a little bit, I have a 2-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 15-year-old. So we've started to integrate them into that, maybe not in the process, right? Because it's a little bit too complex in some of those areas for the 2-year-old.
Yeah. Totally.
But yeah, I mean, like we want to model those behaviors, and, those are the things that we live, right? So I'm pretty frugal in where we spend, but if it's about an experience, like we just spent 2 weeks in Greece on half the time on a boat, like I'm happy to spend money on those types of experiences. Like those are, mind expanding and, once in a lifetime, and we will remember them, and we got pure enjoyment out of them. We can talk about them and enjoy them compared to going and buying something down the road. Like I would prefer to spend zero on that.
Yeah, I'm with you too. For someone watching that doesn't have a ton of means to spend, what's been in your experience, an experience that didn't cost a whole lot, but it's been totally memorable?
Yeah, I would say travel by far, right? Like obviously you can travel very expensively. You can also travel very cheaply, right? So I always challenge people. I'm like, they're like, it's too expensive. I'm like, no, like it's too expensive if you want to limit yourself. Right. But if you say, hey, I'm going to free up my schedule and I'm going to go on off times, I'm going to fly on Thanksgiving when everyone else doesn't want to fly. I'm going to pick the days that are very, very off cycle. You can get extremely low fares, and then you can go to places that are way, way cheaper to, live and experience and do great things, right? Like you can go to Thailand and Vietnam and places and have amazing experiences for relatively low dollars compared to the US, what we would spend going to Starbucks, right? So I do challenge people, and I think travel is one of those interesting things that both expands our mind, but pulls us out of our routine. As much as I love routine, right? Shaking it up is part of what makes routine work, right? Like you need that jolt every now and then that says, hey, wake up. Like maybe this is working, maybe this isn't. Here's something different. Try something else, right?
Yeah, and it totally fits in with this optimization mindset you talk about, because it is through drastic change that you learn things about yourself. And travel is very much one of those things for me. And so being in a new environment without your routine, your normal people, your normal drive time, like all these things, you'll learn a lot about yourself. And you learn about what you like, what you don't like, what agrees with your body, what feeds your soul, like all these different things when you travel and you come out of that routine. So I also like routine. I very much hate routine. I'm with you, man. You know, I just told my wife, I'm like, I need a little bit of boredom. Like I need about a month's worth of like being bored, same routine, and then I won't want it anymore, right? But travel is absolutely one of them. And I love to tell the story of like we went to Maui for our honeymoon. I didn't have a ton of money, but we did this downhill bike tour, and they actually don't offer it as much anymore from the top for various reasons. But that trip, and that was 15 years ago. That trip's gotten better every year in my mind. Like every time we think about it, it's just better and better, right?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I don't know what it cost us. It might have been $250 for both of us. I don't know. It wasn't a ton, you know, it wasn't cheap for us that back then, but that's better than any $250 item I've ever purchased, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm with you on that.
It's really interesting. If you look, there's been a bunch of studies about this kind of, you know, material items and what they do to our brains when we buy them compared to things like travel.
Mhm.
And travel has both lasting memories, but also can be shared, right? We can talk about it and we can share the experience, and we can explain to people how we felt about it. Where you can't do that with an item you buy. You get a quick bump of a high and then it just disappears, right?
Mhm.
And it creates a cycle of wanting to buy more and competing with others, right? But you don't compete about travel, right? You share stories about travel, but you don't like, well, I traveled more than you. Like, when was the last time you heard someone say that? Never, right?
Never, never. Yeah. I think it's hedonic adaptation is like the phrase that you use, right? You adapt to those things, they become the new normal,
Yeah,
as opposed to the feeling of us riding our bikes down through the clouds of Haleakala, right? Like
yeah.
I still remember, I still feel it, right? Um, how's that bag doing?
Oh man, I can't keep eating that. I'm not gonna be able to taste the food tonight. I have a bunch of people coming in. I got to be able to like taste the food at sushi tonight.
You won't be able to taste.
Which is like, for my diet is very bizarre. I don't eat sushi very often, so like
Yeah,
this is a big day.
it's a big deal. You don't want to ruin it.
Yeah, exactly. And so we used to go to the sushi place like at least once a week. So it was like, and so it's been very difficult not going that often.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go back, it's like just a treat.
The treat. I got it. All right. Biggest business blunder. Do you have one?
Yeah. So the biggest one by far in terms of size was at Grasshopper. We spent over $1 million trying to build businesses internally. For a lot of reasons that didn't work. We were focusing on the wrong markets, the wrong problems. We distracted ourselves from the core business, and ultimately tried 6 businesses. One kind of was successful and now has become very successful. But that was kind of by mistake. It just was the right timing. It wasn't because we had the right process. It wasn't because we had the right people necessarily. Like, there were a lot of mistakes. And so we spent $1 million doing that over a year period, a lot of money. And we lost far more than that in growth because we were not paying attention. We weren't focusing on what was important, which was the core business.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, we've had all sorts of other mistakes. Like, I could go through lists of them, but that was the biggest.
Yeah. Do you feel like that set you up for some success later though? Like figuring that out in that year, having that painful year, but then
Oh, for
knowing
sure.
not to do that anymore?
That learning was very clear. Like, I try to tell people this all the time. Like, first, don't tell yourself a fake story in the business. Like, we kept telling ourselves we had hit the most growth we could hit, right? Like, we were so big and we just weren't. Like, we weren't that big a company. When we sold, we were doing $30 million. Like, that's great, but that's not that big. So we just built this myth up. Like, every time we had a slowdown in growth, like, oh, we've hit the top of the market, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, you get bored after a while and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this new thing. I'm going to do this new thing, where I really wish that I had focused. So today I'm a big proponent on like focusing. Even if I have 5 businesses, within those businesses, I expect the team to be very focused. I'm not pulling their time all over the place. And, you know, then just outside of focus, really being very clear on not telling those fake stories, right? And creating myths. I think it goes back to this kind of travel idea, like breaking those myths and saying, you know what, this might not be true. Like, let's challenge this and say, how could we grow more? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And boredom is the huge part, like you just touched on. I think boredom plays into that because your typical entrepreneur is also very creative and I mean, you get bored with this, and there's a new shiny object and you want to chase
Yeah.
after it. It was
Yep.
probably some of these businesses you guys built, right? They were sexy in some way, exciting, new, novel, and you wanted to go after them. So you create a narrative around it. like, oh, we've reached the top. We're the cream of the crop. We're going to add this other supplemental thing, right?
Yeah.
But there are times, though, I think, to clarify, though, there are times when there's supplemental businesses to be added. But it
So I think
is hard. It's hard
the
to
problem for
distinguish
us
between the
is
two.
they weren't supplemental, right? Like they weren't selling to our current customers. They were selling to a
Mm,
different group of people, and
mm,
it wasn't an add-on or something that we could even utilize the current infrastructure and things that we had.
got it.
So that was the even bigger mistake there, right? Like I do agree that creating additional lines of business and additional things I can sell my customers to help improve my customers' lives, that's amazing. That's
Mm,
how you grow a business. But to me, that's part of focus,
yeah.
right? We were like, if we were our company sold to SMBs, right? Super small businesses, 1 to 10 employee companies. The companies we were building were selling to 50 to 100 person companies. Like
Mm,
not even close in terms of customer match, right?
yeah.
It was just a different set of problems.
Different set of problems. Yeah. Like you're starting all over. Best under $100 purchase.
Oh, so ever this year, like, so
This year's totally fine. Yeah.
okay, so I would say my squatty potty.
Okay.
It's like $15. Love it. Huge benefit. That wasn't this year, so that's probably one of the top ones.
Okay.
Cheating a little bit, the steam oven would be my number two. I think it was like $180.
What's a
Um,
steam oven?
Oh my God. So this changed my eating totally. So instead of a microwave, I put my prepared meals. So we prepare lunches ahead of time as a household,
Mhm.
and some dinners because family obligations and whatever. I don't eat breakfast. Um, and instead of putting it in the microwave, I now put it in this little steam oven. It looks like a little toaster oven. You can get super expensive ones that are like built in the house.
Mhm.
This is a countertop one, and it changed two things. One, it slowed down eating because instead of throwing something in the microwave, you now have to wait 15 to 20 minutes for it to heat up naturally nicely.
Hmm.
So instead of 2 minutes, it's 15, 20 minutes. So it kind of slowed down. I had to be intentional and make a decision about eating, which really helped me because I'll just eat really quick, right, in my
Mhm.
natural way. Um, Also, getting rid of the microwave is just good because it kind of kills everything in the food.
Yeah.
Um, but then food that I would never typically prepare for later consumption, like salmon and other things like that, heated up in the steam oven is better than when you cooked it the first time.
No
Like
way.
I love it. So
Huh.
that changed because now I opened up my food options. Like a lot of days of the week, I'll have a piece of salmon and cauliflower rice and things like that that I normally wouldn't have for lunch because it wouldn't be something I would reheat.
So walk me through this real fast. How are you preparing this ahead of time? What's that look like? And then you just throw it in the steam oven after. But
Yeah, so we prepare like a week of lunches and dinners, so probably
Mhm.
about 15 meals, maybe 10 in a week. So
Mhm.
that way there's some options, right? I put all of them in glass containers on Amazon. Like I love these little glass containers. They're pretty cheap, nice
Mhm.
lids. That way when I take it, I take the lid off, put the glass container right into the little steam oven, hit the go button, and the steam oven uses both regular heat like a toaster oven would, plus it creates steam inside. So
Oh,
between those two, it kind of rejuvenates the food and heats it up the way you would normally heat food up in an oven, like nicely.
sure.
Just love it, love it.
And this prepared food, this is frozen in the glass container.
No, no, we do everything each week, so it's refrigerated.
Okay. So you're batch cooking, put it in this glass container, store it in the fridge, and then
I'm not. My partner Dawn, she is,
okay,
and she is so willing and helpful with all of these things. If I was her,
okay,
I'd tell her to I would say, leave me alone. So I'm very lucky in that. And I try to tell her that, but like, she's been both happy to test out all sorts of crazy diets and ways I wanted things cooked,
okay,
and also prepare food for me. So I'm very thankful for
okay. That's awesome, man. You have expanded my horizons, so to speak. I love it, man. All right. And then a couple more real quick, and we'll wrap up for you, man. Is in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? And I can even twist that a little bit and say, what did you used to, believe was wrong, and now you've changed your mind about?
Yeah, I think the biggest change in my mind is really questioning conventional wisdom across the board, right? And saying like, maybe this doesn't work for me. That was the biggest change that had the most impact. And like, let's talk about like real examples right across the board. So diet is this very easy one to talk about, but conventional wisdom about doctors and like what types of doctors work. So I've shifted to a functional doctor. Questioning like things like, as I've changed my diet and cholesterol goes up, am I okay with that? I am okay with that, because I've started to dig in and say conventional wisdom doesn't make a lot of sense here. And the data is actually the opposite, that, healthy cholesterol is far more protective than it is damaging. So if I hadn't opened my mind up to that, I would have been far more scared to try a ketogenic diet or to do these other things that are, quote unquote, extreme, if it bucks kind of conventional wisdom. So I'm super, like, that has been the biggest impact.
Yeah. Yeah. Just back to the trust but verify, right? I mean, you could trust the doctors or trust science, but at the same time, verify it for yourself, right? Like, just don't blindly follow these things, whether it's diet or other conventional wisdom. All right, man. Well, dude, David, it's been great having you on the show, sharing a little bit of the wisdom from the Unstoppable book. You definitely got to pick it up. And last I checked, you were #1 in your category. So congrats for that.
Thanks.
So thanks for being on, and thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Did you have, I know that you've got this, I don't want to call it a side project, but one of your businesses, Super Fat, right? Which is friggin' delicious, right?
Yep.
And these pouches of nut butters. Maybe tell the audience a little bit about it, but then also if you've got a special offer you want to offer the audience, we'll throw that in.
Sure. Yeah. So Super Fat really came out of like me wanting a product like this. I've always liked consuming macadamia nuts, and finding a healthy option for this was very difficult, especially on the go. So it's very hard on a high fat diet to eat things on the go. So worked with a few friends of mine and started building this. And now Mike is running this business and doing a great job at it. It is, a 1.5 ounce size currently, nut butter, combination of macadamia, almonds, coconut, 5 different flavors, high fat, all vegan. I don't eat vegan, but some people do. And yeah, I mean, we've been super happy with it and have a lot of great feedback. I'm happy to offer a discount. We'll get that arranged, 15% off for all your listeners. And we'll get a code set up for that.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. They are freaking delicious, man. So thanks for doing that, dude. And so for the viewer that wants to keep up tabs on what you're doing, what's the best way?
Unstoppablebook.com. That has obviously the book and links to Amazon and Audible, but also signing up for my weekly email newsletter, kind of talking about the 3 to 5 things that I'm thinking about reading, doing, watching, kind of my thoughts on those. We've had really great feedback about that. And the list has grown pretty substantially, well beyond what I expected when I started it. And, so I do, encourage people to sign up for that. And that's an easy way to contact me too.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm on it. I'm enjoying it as well. So David, thanks for the time, man.
Appreciate it, Peter.
Take it easy. Thanks so much for tuning in. It means so much to me and the entire Mission Meats team. Now, I know every show you watch asks you to do something, right? Asks you to subscribe, leave a review, share the show, all the stuff, right? But it's because it's the best way for us to grow our show. So what do you say? If you know someone that would really appreciate listening to this episode, hearing the actionable advice, share it with them, will you? Shoot them the link, iTunes, YouTube, however you're watching this thing, tag them in the comments. Share the show with someone, okay? It'll help them. It'll help us. It'll be great, okay? We're putting this content out so that viewers and listeners like you have gotten some benefit out of it, right? And so if there's something else that you want to hear about, either about from a person or a topic, shoot me an email, peter@missionmeats.co. That's peter@missionmeats.co. And I'll read those emails and see if I can get that person on the show or expert in that topic that you want to hear about so desperately, right? Last thing, you watch this guest try or not try to eat the Reaper. If you want to try to eat the Reaper, right? We've got a challenge going on social media right now, specifically on Instagram, but you can do it on Facebook too. Record yourself eating that bag, tag it with Mission Reaper. Tag us also, right? And for a chance to win $100 of free delicious Mission Meats product for the most hilarious or creative video. So if you want to do that, grab a bag. All right. Now get out there and live your mission. Thanks a bunch.